All right. Well, welcome back to Inside BBI with John and Eric. If you've been following along, we've covered what the show that I owe myself a drink, what the channel's all about, and then we kind of went over camp so far and the rosters battle, and now we want to take a look at the joint practices with the Detroit Lions, and then a quick preview of the preseason game, which is later tonight. So, Eric, we've had a few days to practice. I think it's practice. Was it brawl? Maybe it was brawl. I confused practice and brawl with the Lions these last couple of days, and then we got the game tonight. Your impressions of the joint practice slash fights that we had that cost both teams $200,000.
Yeah, John, we're getting reports here at Quest of another fight breaking out in the cafeteria as we speak. It seems like they've run out of tater tots,
Oh,
and Andrew Phillips is in the middle of it. So just another brawl occurring right now at
that's,
Quest. So yeah, no, it
that's
was
nice.
great. There's some people that are going to be like, I don't want fighting. Someone's going to get hurt. This is terrible. Look, we've gone through 10, 11, 12 years of just wimpy football,
Right,
and
right.
this is testosterone stuff. This is great, manly men doing manly things. And the coaches, regardless of what they say, and I was actually surprised Dable didn't come out with the usual talking point about, oh, we don't want any of that. He didn't seem to have a problem with that even in publicly. He said we have to
Nah,
clean some of this stuff up. But the coaches love this. Detroit came in here trying to intimidate them, and the Giants weren't having any of it, and they pushed back, and it was, um, the fan videos from the stands are fantastic because you've got, yeah, it was like, I don't think a lot of people understand. I showed my wife this, and she's like, what are they doing? This is dumb. Why are they
right,
doing this?
right.
And I'm like, no, this is great. This is awesome. And the fans that were there, it's like Gladiator time. If you watch the movie Gladiator, it was like, so she just walked by and looking at me.
That's
Uh, um, no, I thought they got a lot. Look, the bottom line is this: they got a lot of work done. This was the most important practice they will have of the preseason, including the preseason games, because this was the starters going against their starters for extended periods of time, not drag them, not take them to the ground, but there was contact. It was physical. It was feisty. There were hits. I mean, Eric Gray got decleated on one of the hits,
right.
which was more dirt. I mean, this was they were fired up and they were mad, and I guarantee you they felt it the next day. And then they came out and did it they did it the following day. Those guys won't play like that, practice like that in any of the preseason, not the starters. They won't do that. And then we've got another one coming up against the Jets. So these were incredibly important. And the other bottom line is the team held up. They didn't, you can't come out of this and clearly say Detroit won these practices. At
Right,
best, you can say it
right.
was a draw. And then certain elements of this, the Giants did better. So, and this is a Super Bowl team caliber team they're practicing against. So again, does it matter in the long run? That remains to be determined based on what they do in the regular season. But this is the kind of stuff that gets you ready to not get blown out 40-0 on opening day. So I loved it. I thought it was great.
So what did you think of? Because I think I liked it. I think it's a little overplayed on what it means, but it does seem to mean something. Daniel Jones jumped as stuff was going on, and he didn't. If you watch it really closely, he didn't do a ton. So let's not pretend like he came in and threw somebody to the ground. But the fact that he got in there and his own players were kind of like, we really appreciate that. We don't want him to we want him to stay out of that, but they appreciate it. And I've heard a lot of pundits talk about what that's going to mean to the team. What did you think? Like, I think it's a little overblown.
It's overblown, but he got in there. He dirtied his nose. It'll carry some, I think it'll carry some weight. Just while you were talking, I was thinking about that old play. I don't know if Giants fans will remember when Dave Brown supposedly ran over Deion Sanders
Yes.
in a game, and he sort of skipped back to the huddle. It was tougher than that for Daniel to get into a pile and to scrum a little bit. Like you said, he didn't do too much, but it shows that he's got, like he said, he's got his players back, and
Yeah,
it's a better look for him than to turn his back and walk away and saying, I don't want anything to do with this, you know. But it's overblown a little bit. But I think it's more important again that they just, you know, they just didn't back down, and they had fight in them. And I don't know, it just football at its basic level, football still is fighting and battling and scraping and you know all the stuff that why guys like the game. It's just, you know, it's manly stuff, men doing manly stuff, and a lot of it is, again, is gladiator stuff. I mean, it really is. So
right.
like Jim Fossil took his team to watch, or was it Coughlin? One of them took him when Gladiator came out. They took him to watch Gladiator. It's this, you're in an arena and you're battling and you're fighting against other people. So you can see why somebody like Drew Phillips, the cornerback that they drafted, who was supposed to be a feisty physical guy, and he was in all of these fights, it seemed.
Right,
You can
right.
see why they like him and why he's now a starter. And basically, he's penciled in right now as a starter already. And again, he'll have his growing pains, but you can see, well, so much of the Giants' problems on defense have been that spot, including run defense. You got somebody in there who's going to scrape, and he did that. So I thought it was good. I will say this one last thing. I was worried that after the first day, the team would not be mentally and physically able to sustain that the second day, and Detroit would get its revenge on the second day, and that didn't happen. So the second day started off with both teams behaving, and then about midway through, there was the incident that everyone's showing where Malik Neighbors and the corner got into it, and that turned into a big fight, and it just practice went downhill after that with the fighting,
Right.
not place with the fighting. But I was worried that, you know, the Giants said, well, we showed them the first day, we don't have to worry about the second. But they didn't back down on the second day too. So I think that's what I think it really is telling. Whether it matters, I don't know. It's just opinion. But I actually
Sure.
like it.
So, I mean, a couple things. One, and I'll start with what you just finished with. There's a difference between playing with emotion and being emotionally invested in what you're doing and riding the wave of emotion, because when things settle back down, it's hard to come back up again.
Yes.
You've expelled so much energy into this frenetic moment to then get it back, to get back to the basics. It's really hard to get mentally focused in. So I am glad to see they maintained intensity the next day. It wasn't just like, just this big and then it was all done. The thing about Jones, I liked it. I thought it was fine. I think it's a little over. This is not Phil Simms putting his chin strap back on and banging his head into Ronnie Lott at the end of the game against the 49ers, like letting him know that this stuff was, we'll get you next game. This is not that moment, but it was good to see. What I don't like to see is Malik Neighbors throwing wild right hands. You cannot break your hand. I don't mind you getting in a scuff, but first off, hockey players everywhere are laughing their ass off. Every one of you is now wearing this specialized Marvin the Martian helmet that you're wearing to protect your head, and then you're throwing punches and all this stupid. Please don't break your hand. We cannot have you break your hand. Like, I don't care if you want to grab his face mask, you want to just hug, you want to put whatever. Just don't throw any punches. It's going to break your hand. That's all I got to say. I was thinking though, the people talk about the fights and we see that, and it gets really overplayed because of the amount of, I mean, just the people in the stands that are there watching with cameras now. Back in the day, I don't know if you remember, Brandon Short and Jeremy Shockey got into it because Shockey refused to do, I think he had to sing for your lunch, and
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Shockey refused to do it and got in a fight with Brandon Short over it. These are things that Lawrence Taylor smashed Derek Brown's face mask, where I think he broke his nose on the play in camp because Taylor was pissed at him for something, and I think that probably ruined Brown's career, by the way, from there. But the point is, this stuff and these fights and stuff, they used to happen within team that we would never know anything about. It's now just because it's so public. I do think the Lions walk around with a little bit of Dan Campbell's kind of attitude, and that's fine. It works for them. But if you don't back down from it, and it's kind of like punching a bully in the nose. You're gonna have to let them know this isn't gonna be a cakewalk. You're not gonna come in here and just push us around. And I think the Giants showed something. I think as a team, some of the veterans and stuff that we have now that have come from other places, I think have really brought something to this team that we didn't have in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's a mindset. So the old Raiders teams of, 70s and 80s, or you can go back to the 60s even, but the old Raiders teams had a swagger to them.
Right.
You're not gonna, and a little, they had a, and again, I'm not saying be dirty, but they had a little bit of a dirty
Well,
element
they
to
they
the
were a little
game
bit.
too.
They
Yeah.
were,
So,
yeah.
but it's this added, and I'm not saying the Giants should become there or could become that, but that you got to, we have seen the Giants be physically intimidated in regular season football games in the last decade. You've seen them
Sure.
be beat up front on both sides of the football, and you've come away with the impression that the Giants are the weaker team up front in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and you can't win games like that. So anything that sort of builds up that sort of warrior mentality, I don't have a problem. Now, people are going to say, well, you can't do that in a game. Well, of course you can't do that in a game because you'll get thrown out of the football game, and you'll cost your team the game. So you're able to do it a little bit more in this. I mean, this happened back in, I brought this up on the website a few times. This happened back when the Jets came up to Albany, and Coughlin said he's never going to do scrimmages against the Jets again in camp because so many fights broke out in
Right.
Albany. It was the same thing. This isn't anything new or anything, but like you just said, people didn't have cameras like they
Right.
do now, so you didn't see the pictures of the video of this stuff coming out like it does now. And you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned this, there are so many stories of Giants players physically tormenting their teammates, breaking noses, things that you'd get arrested for in a
Oh
normal
yeah.
situation, um, behind the scenes. So it's a bunch of jocks with again that are paid to be physical, aggressive people doing their thing. And again, you don't want them to back down a little bit. So but lost in all of this is this. And people are gonna say, wow, there's a bunch of fighting. No, they got great work done. The Giants players made a lot of plays, good plays both on offense and defense, both on the one-on-one drills, the 7-on-7 drills, and the 11-on-11 team drills, to the point where you're like, and you saw it, you saw the reaction even on the website when the tweets were coming in and the video was coming in and going, hey, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. We look pretty good.
Right.
And I know you're just seeing highlights and stuff, but the highlights matter too. And you were seeing both sides. You saw breakdowns and coverage, the negative side and things like that. But you didn't see a lot. You didn't see Detroit dominating. You didn't see Detroit taking it to the Giants, and you're saying, well, they're clearly a better team. If you went to that practice and you didn't know which was the better team, supposedly the better team, I don't know if you would have known that,
Right. Walking away
watching
from
those
that. Yeah.
practices. So
And I think too, with what you said, back to the tough guy part of it, the Giants have had players over the last 6 or 7 years that and I'm not going to call anybody out or anything like that. They were tough guys in moments, and lots of times it was doing something stupid. Oh, something happened, I'm going to retaliate, and I hit a guy from behind, and we take a 15-yard penalty. But the toughness that usually happens in those games when stuff happens like that, and go back to I know I'm dialing it way back, but go back to the 90 game in the championship game against the 49ers. Burt puts a cheap shot on Jeff Hosteller.
yeah,
The Giants team on the side said, we're coming after you. We let you know we get the opportunity. We're going to hit you. We're going to hit you. We're going to make you pay for that. And it wasn't dirty and wasn't cheap, but that's what they said. Over the last number of years, though, what you're talking about, where it shows up the most, where we lacked that intestinal fortitude, so to speak, is when our turnstile offensive line would just let guys come through, where we need to establish dominance. The other team is taking physical liberties with Jones. They'll get through and give him a little late hit or throw him down, or they're hitting Saquon a little bit late or piling on, and we're letting it happen. Now you got to kind of retaliate. You got to get back, and it's not cheap shot. It's you physically have to go back and do it, and we couldn't do it. We absolutely, and it's the Eagles and the Cowboys proved it over and over again. It's why we can't beat them. They would just beat us up front. And when you start to lose that's the tough guy piece. Your receivers aren't the tough guys. Those are the guys that make the plays, and they're the highlights. They're not the tough guys. It's your offensive line, it's your tight ends, it's even the backs when they're carrying the ball, but that's all tied together, and we just didn't have it.
Well, it's been on defense too, because how many games have we in the
True.
last decade, the offensives had the lead and they give up the game at the end, either at the end of the game or the other team's running the ball down our throat. So
Right.
it just, again, this doesn't mean the Giants aren't going to be dominant up front or
Sure.
anything like
Sure.
that. All it means though is that start. I view it as this. Again, it's just one information point, one data point, if you will, that there might be a different mindset with the team moving forward, that they might not be the pushovers that they've been, and they have been. Let's be honest with you. The record clearly demonstrates that. So I just like to see the fight in them. And again, I don't want to overemphasize it, but it needs to be emphasized that they didn't run out of steam after the first
Sure.
practice. It continued in the second practice. I don't know if fans remember, but last year the Giants went to Detroit, had the same setup in Detroit. The Giants got their butts kicked on the first day, came back and played much better on the second day, and people felt it was a draw. This time around, the Giants came out ready, and both days were, fights. They were, and I mean, not fights as in fights breaking out. I mean, both teams were
They're
going at it,
contested. Yeah.
contested.
Yeah.
It was, they were at equal. To be honest with you, and getting into specifics, Daniel Jones didn't look out of place. He didn't. Again, there was, we talked about in the other video, there was a pick or two that were dropped. Our impression would have been differently at that, but he looked good. The receivers looked good. Brian Burns dominated on defense. Malik Neighbors dominated on offense. And that's not just Giants fans saying that. That's people that were on Detroit's side saying that. That's fans from the media that don't have a bias either way. They don't have a connection to either team, from the national media saying the same thing. So we've got guys now that the other team goes, whoa, we can't block this guy, or we can't cover this guy.
Right. Right.
Connor Hughes, who covers the Jets and the Giants now, and has been going to Giants training camps since, I think he said 2014. So he said, oh, Odell Beckham. He said he's never seen a receiver dominate, including Odell, like Malik Neighbors did during these two practices. So there's good things on the field that happened. The offensive line did not look bad. They had a little rough moment on the second day of practice at the beginning, but they didn't look bad at all. So there were a lot of good signs on both sides of the things to clean up, but that's what you
Sure.
expect again. But it was a really good thing to happen. I mean, these joint practices are awesome, so I hope they keep doing them.
Well, I mean, to quote Joe Shane from Hard Knocks, the best predictor of future results is of
Pass.
your past play, your past results. What we saw was a different result or a different outcome in camp versus what we've seen previously. The way things came about, how we handled our business, how we responded was different than what we've seen the last few years. Again, it's one snapshot out of a bunch of pictures. We won't know until the real, bullets are flying when the season starts. But I do think there's a feeling, and again, we talked about it in one of our other videos, is that I think there's the veteran pieces on the line, the guys, because we're not even playing with the line that we think is going to be the starting line. We're missing our center.
Right.
Our original right tackle is not out there. So you're kind of mixing and matching here, and yet we still stood up to them. This is a team that, quite frankly, if they were more disciplined, they would have been in the Super Bowl. They blew the game against the 49ers in the championship game. They had a lead. They got a little weird. They just kind of dropped the ball there. This is a team that does play very, very physical. They like to kind of bring that out of other teams, is that dog mentality that bites you in the kneecaps, as Dan Campbell likes to say. And, we've up till now, teams have kind of marked us on their schedule like, great, we're playing the Giants. And it changed slightly in 22, went backwards last year. Maybe what we're seeing here is what we thought we would have seen last year. Way too early to say. So that being said, both teams got fined heavily for the amount of fights and things like that. The league wants to clean that up. They don't want They definitely don't want fights like that happening in the league, in training camp, and definitely being pushed about and made a big deal about. So here we are. We've done the joint practice. Now we have the game coming up tonight. Based on a lot of things that we've heard but not been told directly, what's your thoughts first on who do we think we're even going to be seeing playing tonight for the Giants? Who's maybe not going to play?
Well, we as of right now, let's see, it's almost 3 p.m. and I have not been on X/Twitter while we've been recording this. We don't know if they're starters. So Dable said on Tuesday's last press conference that he wasn't going to answer that question, basically. Campbell said he's not going to play his most important players. Historically speaking, the teams don't play their starters in the first game, including going back a number of years. So this it would be odd for them to play the starters tonight. Impossible, no, but I wouldn't expect it. So I would think we're going to see the backups, and there are going to be places where that's a good thing and that's a bad thing. I think the offensive line could get a little messy because of the injuries to Neal and Schmitz. Instead of your guys that would normally be playing on the third team are going to be on the second team. It has a domino effect. So I think people might take away. I think if the offensive line plays well tonight, I'll be surprised. And I think, but people got to understand that the offensive line right now is not it's not what it's going to be because of the injuries. Not that we have to count on Neal as a
Sure, sure,
starter,
sure.
but if he was in there playing with the second team tonight, that's different than having like Matt Nelson playing or something like that. So it's just a different thing. So we don't know who's going to play tonight. The way I'm going to look at this game tonight is not about who wins or loses. It's going to be more about individual performances. So I'm going to look at guys who are pushing for playing time with the first team and guys who are pushing to make the roster. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, and definitely with that, one interesting way to look at it too is if there's some guys that we were kind of wondering about, like where they are in the pecking order. Like, let's say, one of the previous videos you talked about that, we're seeing Chapman on the lines, been playing with some of the ones
Yeah.
and stuff. If he were to suddenly not be playing for whatever reason, that's a big telling factor that they already think pretty highly of him and they're not wasting him in this game. We want to see other guys. He's going to play, I'm pretty
Right.
sure.
Right.
But that's something to look at. For me, Jones isn't playing. Even if they didn't say it yet, there's no way they're playing him in the first preseason game coming off the ACL still. They're not going to worry about that because these games really are designed for the guys who are desperately trying to be on the team. And you generally don't want to risk guys who've had any kind of an injury history coming in or anything else in a situation like that. Locke's going to play. DeVito's going to play. We really want to see how those two play. And I know it's a different when you start getting to the third string, it's a little harder to judge. If DeVito lights it up, is he lighting it up, or is he lighting it up against a bunch of guys who aren't playing? Or if he struggles, is it because we're down to the guys who really aren't making our team
Right.
either? But I do want to see how those two play because that's going to come down to do we carry two or do we carry three, and
Right.
do we carry DeVito over Locke?
And I wouldn't be playing guys like they're going to be throwing to, like, I wouldn't play Wandale Robinson. I just wouldn't
Right?
be playing. I wouldn't play Malik Neighbors. I mean, people are going to be like, well, you got to play. Not in this game.
No, no way.
I wouldn't play this. I could see Jalen Hyatt maybe playing some snaps, but not too many. Darius Slayton doesn't need to play in this game. I mean, those are the kinds of guys that I just don't think they're going to play. So again, so when people are going to say, well, where are these wide receivers we're talking about? Well, the guys won't be playing in this game. So it's going to be the Allen Robinsons. It's going to be the Year Asantes. It's going to be Miles Boykin and Gunner and Isaiah
McKenzie.
McKenzie and
Yeah.
things like that. And these are guys that we don't even know are going to make the team. So that's why fans are going to overreact to this game. And my message to them is most of the players playing tonight will not be on this team. They just won't. There are 91 players
Right.
on the roster. Only 53 are going to make it. Some of the guys that are going to be on this 53 aren't even on the 91 right now because they're going to pick up somebody,
Sure.
in September when the cuts are made or whenever that is. But the thing is just look who's who's throwing the ball, who's catching the ball, who's blocking, and remember that. Remember that in the back of your mind that this isn't the first team guys. These are the backups, and there's no cohesion with these guys. So you're really, again, you're looking, and the same thing. I tried to make this in my game preview. Everyone always overreacts to the special teams in the preseason. What the coaches, I've watched enough football over the years and heard enough special teams coaches say this repeatedly. We are trying to figure out what players on our roster are even good at special teams. We know the guys who are, but we're trying to figure out who might be. So they're not going to play so. The guys that are going to be playing on specials tonight are not going to be your usual studs. They're going to be guys that they're experimenting with to see if they can even do it. So if somebody gives up a kick return for a touchdown or a punt return for a touchdown, that's making the coach's decision easier on who to keep and who to cut. So just again, it's practice. This is a practice tonight. This is a glorified scrimmage, and it'd be like, any kind of test that you would give somebody to see if they're good at anything in any field that you do.
Sure.
Can this person handle this? Can they, and that's what they're trying to find out tonight. So they know who can handle it. They're trying to figure out who can't handle it.
Well, I think too, I think the special teams piece is going to be huge because don't forget, this is that new
Yep.
kickoff. I haven't seen it enough to get a real good feeling on like what we're going to do to be different, but it is different. It is radically different than
It's
anything that
crazy.
they've ever done.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get why you're trying to cut down on those just crazy collisions. I kind of don't understand why you don't just line them everybody up except for the kicker and the one player, line everybody up man to man and then kick it and count. You got like a 3 count and then they go and you just block. And that way nobody's coming free the way you do it now. Guys are running free, you're kicking it and then they come. Now this whole thing changes everything. It's interesting though, because some of those guys are going to be specials only, but if they stand out tonight, like let's say Gunner plays wide receiver.
Right.
And if he makes a number of catches, like
Yes.
good catches, now all of a sudden it's like, okay, before I thought he might just be the punt returner or kick returner and he can cover, he's actually can catch because McKenzie can.
Right.
McKenzie can play wide receiver. He has multiple different. Boykin, he's been more of a I can do a little bit of that and definitely more of the special teams guy. So he's more like then you got Bryce Ford Wheaton, who looked really good against the Lions last year, then blew his knee out. So
And was a gunner last year. We don't
yeah.
know if they're going to be using them this year. So, yeah,
So
but
you've
I was just on your gunner point. He's a perfect example. What you just said is, what if he makes plays as a receiver tonight? Because
right.
that helps him. That's the kind of thing to watch tonight.
If Darius Slayton is playing tonight, it's because he's on the market for other teams. That's the only way he plays with our receivers, and I just don't see him doing it because you gotta have 4 really solid, and we have 3, and I'm actually putting Hyatt as solid, but in reality we know Slayton is probably the more accomplished receiver. He's definitely the more accomplished, maybe the more ready, but Hyatt just has just so many more skills than
Right.
than that. So I think he won't see him, but if he does, that's a telling sign of where they're going in that direction. Because that means they are looking at one of those other veterans that they're going to keep, and then maybe another younger guy along with a specials only guy. So it'll be interesting to watch that. Offensive line, I think you brought him up in another video. Kubis is the guy that we want to see. I want to see how he does. Yes, he's playing, second and third team guys, but then again, he's a rookie free agent. If he
Yeah.
stands out against second and third team guys, that's still saying something.
Well, this is the thing here. So here's the offensive line based on their depth chart for the second team. So I don't even know this guy. No one ever talks about. I have never even seen his name mentioned in practice. But the second team left tackle right now is K-juiced. I don't even know how to say his name. Kajust.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. Okay,
but
yeah, yeah.
he was on the practice squad last year. But right now he's penciled in. He's ahead of Nelson right now on their depth chart as the left tackle. They got Mayfield, who's actually some people have said keep an eye on at left guard. You got to figure Schlottman is going to be the center tonight. And then Kubis is out there. And then Zudu, who we drafted as a guard. We kind of experimented a little bit with tackle as a rookie. Only used him as a guard last year until we threw him out in camp, until we threw him out at tackle against the 49ers. Welcome to the NFL part two there.
Good luck.
But Izzuto is really important because he's right now the swing tackle on this team right now. So
Right.
I would be watching. He's one of my must guys to watch last night. Like you said, Kubis is a guy to keep an eye on. But that second team line is scary to me. I mean, but again, some of these guys are not going to be even on the team. So this is where I'm saying don't overreact to the offensive line tonight because, and people are going to say, well, they're only going to carry 9 offensive linemen. The 5 starters aren't not going to play. We have a 6th guy and 7th guy who aren't playing because of injuries. And so that only leaves 2 other guys that are going to be playing tonight that are even going to be on the roster. So what I'm saying is, of all the linemen they run out there tonight, and it'll be 10 or 11 linemen, only 2 of them are going to be on the team.
Right. Right.
So when you think of it in those numbers, and how well can you judge a guard when the other 3, 4 guys around him aren't doing their
Sure.
job? You know, so
Right.
that's when the second team offensive line blocks well in the preseason, I'm impressed. So I don't see it that much.
This
So
is that whole it's kind of like the line from a movie years ago, Other People's Money. It's the individual pieces are worth more than the sum of the whole, and meaning that in this case the result doesn't really matter. I don't really care if we win or lose per se, but I want to see those individual pieces. I want to
yes,
see how did that player play, because he might be surrounded by guys I knew was never going to make the team, and so that doesn't matter. But like you said, so if Kubius, if he's getting pushed into the backfield, that has nothing to do with who's playing next to you.
right.
But if he's holding his guy up, that's great. But if other guys are stunting through and he did the best he could, he took his guy and the guy who was supposed to pick up didn't, you're not going to be able to, that's not going to show anything.
And with him, I'm looking more movement because a lot of rookie linemen need a year or 2 in a strength program. So even if he does kind of get pushed back a little bit, I'm more interested to see, can he mirror and slide and keep people in front of him at this point. I'm also really looking to see, and this is what you're getting at, Izudu, are people just running right by him? You
Right.
know,
Right.
if he's playing right or left tackle tonight, are people just blowing right past him? Because that's going to be a bad sign. To me, he's one of the must-watch players in this game because he's the swing tackle right now until Neil gets back. And um, he's important. If he fails, they've got issues on the offensive line again if somebody gets hurt. So that's one guy to definitely to keep an eye on.
And then you have, and then I think tight end will be interesting because of the depth chart that they threw out. Does the rookie Johnson play? And at this point, based on the depth chart, you would have to say he does.
Yeah,
But
I
if
would think
he,
he'd play.
but if he doesn't play, then that depth chart didn't mean anything. And then
Yeah,
we knew what we had and we're not risking him. He's got it. To me,
he's got to play.
you
He's
got to put him
got.
on it.
There are some guys that you kind of want to protect, but they need to play. I mean, they got to play in order to get better.
Right.
He's one of them. So
So, so Thibodeau, Burns, Lawrence, we're not seeing any of those guys.
well, that's the
Is
other thing. I don't think our pass rush is going to be any good tonight because if you're not playing Burns and Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence, there goes your pass rush. Unless Aziz has, is a one-man wrecking crew. And remember, Detroit's offensive line is really good and their depth is pretty good. So, I don't think our pass rush is going to look tonight, and people are going to be flipping out about the pass rush too. And I'll be like, well, when you have Boogie Basham as your number 2 guy, you're not going to get after the quarterback. So again, calm. What I'm going to say, calm down, people. We're playing a Super Bowl contending team that has better depth than us right now at some important positions, and it's going to show up in some places. And the lines are one of those areas.
well, that'll be pretty telling, because that I agree with you. But if the opposite happens,
Yeah, if the opposite happens,
that
that's
says a lot about the fact that maybe the Lions' talent level isn't exactly that much better than ours. Once you get past the first line starters, I think Aziz has to really dominate, just because you should. In theory, if you were a guy that could stop getting hurt, you probably are starting on this team. And maybe we're not even going after a guy like Burns. We might not even have gone Thibodeau at that moment. We might have changed what we would have done at the top of the draft if we knew Aziz was the guy. The few times that he shows when he is on the field and he can rush the passer. He
Right.
just A, can't stay on the field, and B, we don't see anything else but the rush from him.
But you also have, but then opposite him is going to be either like Benton Whitley or
Right.
Boogie or Ovi, and I can't even pronounce his last name. Ogo Hufo. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. But you've got guys out there that aren't even going to be on the team
Right.
playing tonight. Ben Whitley's probably not making this team. Ovi's probably going to be on the practice squad at best. Same with Benton, maybe at best they're going to be on it.
Right.
Lamont Fox isn't playing tonight because he's hurt. So, so that's what I think I was going to say. Like you said, if Detroit can't block these guys, that's more damning about Detroit than it says about us. So, again, I'm going to look at defensive line tonight. I'm going to look at a couple players on the offensive line. I think there's an interesting competition at wide receiver and tight end, like you said. And the big kind of thing, and again, and not because it's going to matter for starters this year, is the quarterback competition. Locke and DeVito tonight. Who looks better? And we should talk about running backs in a second too. But Locke and Drew Locke and DeVito, which of the two look better with their playing
Sure.
time tonight?
Well,
Because there's going to be a little pressure on Drew Locke tonight. Because I'm not saying Tommy DeVito is all that, but he showed last year he's not chopped liver either. And it's just, I'll put it this way, it's going to be interesting to see who plays better at the position tonight.
absolutely. But before we go to the running backs, I do think there is one spot that is going to be very telling, even though the competition on the other side shouldn't be as challenging. I think the cornerback spot. I
Oh yeah.
sus
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
sus
That's a biggie. That's a
I
biggie. That's
suspect. Yeah,
huge.
I
That
sus
you're 100% correct.
I suspect that the guys that might be currently penciled in as a starter over there, they might still be playing tonight. Cordell
Oh yeah.
Flott might
No,
be
that
playing because
yeah.
we're not settled there.
No, yeah, and you're 100% correct. The guys playing tonight might be starters on opening day. And again, this is a really important game for people like Trey Hawkins. It's huge for someone
Right.
like him. Even Darnay Holmes. So, but I'm looking down the line here. Does Nick McLeod play tonight? That'll be telling. So if Nick doesn't play tonight, that means they're higher on him than we realize. But if he does play, maybe they're saying
See,
we
I
want to
think
see more of him. We want to see more of him. You know
yeah,
that.
I think McLeod's a known, right? He's a known element. I know I've got this. I don't think he's great, but I know I can play him. I know he knows his role. I know he can do a lot of the stuff. He might have some physical limitations, but he can do. I don't know about these other guys, whether they could be the starter. So Flott could be the starter over McLeod, and McLeod still be the guy that sits tonight and Flott play because
I
they need to see him prove
Yeah,
it in a game.
I'd play Flott tonight. I would play Flott tonight. I'd have
Absolutely.
him out there because you need to know. You need to know. You got to know. I mean, and that's not a. Sometimes you just need information, And again, it's a new coaching staff. Remember, now that being said, the defensive back coach knows these guys. So, but we could see some vet corners play tonight. Like Long could be playing again.
Oh,
If I'm
sure.
looking down, I'm looking at the names right here because there's so many names to go over. They've Herndon, the other veteran corner they got, and they picked up some waiver wire guys who I'm not sure if they're ready or not. So yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up because corner is probably corner's probably the most interesting position to watch tonight. Corner by far is probably the most interesting that looking at this again. There are individual matchups throughout this, but as a position group, corner's the thing. If we see guys getting burned deep repeatedly, that's a bad sign. But if somebody like Trey Hawkins plays really well or Flott tonight, that's a good sign. So that's probably the most important.
Yeah, I would think so. And the other thing is tackling. You want to look at that because lots of times the you second and third team and they practice against each other all week. We kind of know what they're running and what they're not running. So it becomes more of how are the physical pieces of the game. And if that corner is out there and they're just missing tackles, they miss their like if they're playing press coverage, if they miss the chuck, if they're just being manhandled by the receiver, that's a bad sign because you're not going against the top tier talent. it's lesser versus, lesser at this moment. And if you're getting physically out just kind of manhandled, that that's a bad sign. It's one thing to make a mistake. Some passes might, maybe somebody blew the over the top coverage and it might look bad for you, but the coaches know that wasn't you. But if you're just getting run over or you're taking yourself out of a play, if you're a linebacker and you're not doing contain, if you're just running down the line and you're letting them, that's a bad thing. You got to know your assignments
Right.
over anything else. So
And
the
tied
other,
in, oh, I'm sorry.
no, no,
I
no,
was
you're
just
fine.
saying real quick, tied in with that is at safety. So you got the two veterans who are hurt. Jalen Mills is still on the pup, and Riley's dealing with a concussion. So the two veterans who probably would have played some tonight aren't there. So everybody else, I don't think they're going to play Pinnock. I don't think.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Maybe, and I'm not sure on Belton. They may give Belton some time. So you're going to have a really young safety group in there. Newbin, I expect to play a lot. Javarius Owens, I expect to play a ton. And there are people that people don't talk about, like Caleb Hayes and Alex Johnson, who I expect to play a lot. They're very young. There's again, expect mistakes. People are going to be
Sure.
like, "Why is that guy wide open?" Well, because these guys are rookies who are in a brand new defense. It's just going to happen. But I think Newbin is a guy to watch tonight because I expect him to play a ton. And again, this gets into the tackling that you just mentioned. And also into the tackling, we talked about this in the other video. The other interesting spot to me tonight is a group. You said cornerbacks, but what do they do at inside linebacker?
Right. Right.
Um, they got a bunch of names. They got Deontay Johnson. They got Darius Muasau. They got Darian Beavers. They got Carter Coughlin. They got Matthew Adams. Who they keep maybe two of those guys. Who of that group makes it? I would think Coughlin and Adams are competing potentially for one spot. So that leaves you with Beavers and Johnson against each other. Deontay Johnson and Darian Beavers are two of the more interesting people to watch tonight to me, the inside linebackers. Those two.
Yeah, I agree. And I still think we probably don't have the full makeup of this team at that position until we get through the cuts and we see what else might be out there. So a guy might make it and just to be the bottom of the row, and then they get dropped off and we bring somebody else on. Coughlin has the advantage because he's always been pretty good on specials.
Right.
So if he shows anything in base defense, then again, it's very much like a McKenzie or Gunner. If he can show he's a receiver, now you've got two things that are really in your favor. Coughlin has one thing in his favor, and he hasn't really done much on defense at all. So yeah, I think the inside linebacker piece is big. The defensive tackle pieces too, because we know a
Yeah.
couple of the guys probably. I mean, Lawrence definitely isn't playing. They might even. I don't think Jordan Phillips plays. I just feel like they don't need to. He's a known commodity. Why put him
Right.
out there? He's an older guy. I don't need to. I know what he's going to do. It's just a matter, do we keep him or we don't keep him? It's his play in a preseason game wouldn't determine that. So then it's really some of the other guys. Davidson, Riley, those guys, how do they do? Which one stands out versus the other? How do they fit in with the overall group? Because like you said in the other video, we still don't really know what we've got other than Lawrence. Ryder Anderson, he may or may not play tonight. I mean, I would think he
Oh
does,
God, I
but
expect him to
it
play. Yeah, I would
it
think
it, it
if
just
he
depends.
doesn't play, that's telling. But I would
Yeah,
expect him to play.
well,
I
that's the
mean,
thing is who's the other guy next to Lawrence? We don't really know.
yeah, and so there are two things here. So when I look at the nose tackle types, the big run stuffer types, we have the Jordan Rileys and DJ Davidsons. We've seen them flash in the past. Are they more than that? So can Jordan Riley come into a game and for Dexter Lawrence when Dexter Lawrence needs a breather, and can Jordan Riley play at a high level on a consistent basis? The hope is yes. He's a big man, and there were some plays he made last year in the brief playing time that he had, both in the preseason and the regular season, where you went, "Whoa, where did that come from?" Well, because he was not a highly regarded guy even as a low draft pick. He was taken, was it the seventh round or sixth round, and he
Right.
wasn't even. People were like, why waste a pick on him? But then he made some plays last year that you were like, it caught your attention. So hopefully they look good. But the real guys, again, to me, are Ryder Anderson and Elijah Chapman tonight. I don't know what they see in Ryder Anderson. They see something, but I hope to see what they see tonight because I haven't seen it yet. And then Elijah Chapman has been making noise in camp, even though despite his size. So those to me are guys to watch. There are probably 10 guys in this game that I'm really going to really watch, and about four of them are on the defensive line.
So with that, we want to try to keep this as tight as
Yeah.
possible.
You
Running
wanted
back.
running backs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do running back, and then we'll finish running back, and then I know you said 10. Let's just put like let's pick
Oh,
three of our
three.
own specifically that we
Yeah.
each want. So from the running back position, I mean, I think Singletary, we won't see him. There's no reason for
No.
him to play. So then it becomes of these younger guys, you know, how they. It'll be very telling who's the first one in, because that's either a really good sign or it's like we need to. If it's Gray, that actually might be, we need to see you with this, with what
Yeah, that's
can,
a good point. That's a good
with
point.
our
Yeah.
best line that we're putting out here tonight. Because if you don't produce here, then I don't know if we're going to, because the other guys, I think they have a little bit more leash with the other two.
That's actually a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, and I didn't think of that. So one of the things to consider is that as you get into later into the game, for both teams, usually, again, Detroit's got a better offensive line and depth situation than most teams. When you talk about the best offensive lines in the NFL, Detroit's up there. Just so
Right.
if fans don't understand that, Detroit is one of the, you can put them up in the category of the 49ers and the Eagles. They're that good. Okay. So their depth is good. Everybody else, it's not. So when you get into the second and third teams of most NFL teams now, the offensive lines can't function. And if you put a back behind one of those lines, you can't get a good read on that back. So you're 100%. If they want to get a good read on somebody, they would want to play that player earlier than later in the game, because when you get in the third and the fourth quarter, it's going to be a jailbreak back there. And again, people are going to go, well, our offensive line stinks. And you're going to be saying, yeah, but all five of those guys aren't even going to be on the team. So you
Right.
see it every year. It happens every year, and it drives me crazy because the five guys out there aren't even going to be on the team.
Right.
When those guys start being able to block, it tells you have a really good depth situation. But anyways, but yeah, you're right. So I thought originally it's obviously going to be Tyrone Tracy playing, but you could be right. It could be Eric Gray who starts off, so they can, because there's two ways to look at it. You, like you said, get a good read on somebody, or give them experience. It's one of the two things that you're doing tonight.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there are other, it's the other side of the coin of that is, well, if he doesn't play right there and they just put him later, it's because they're done with him. I don't necessarily think you can
No,
say
not
it's
that
one.
either.
Yeah, I don't think it's one way or the other per se. I just think it could be more telling if Gray, who we both have talked about as a guy who kind of hasn't stepped up, and I think some people hold against him the issues when he should have never been a returner,
Yeah.
but he did still really, he lacks a second gear and it hasn't really shown a lot. If he's playing right off, it's because I want to see him with whatever I can put out there that's the best of that tonight, and I want to see what he does. Because if I already think Tracy might be better than him, or I'm thinking, whatever, if he's competing for the third role or the fourth role, I need to see him with guys that are better and that are blocking and playing against better. By the way, it's still going to be the Lions' second team on defense and stuff versus everybody in front of him on both sides of the line probably are not going to be on the teams. And
Right.
then I see him. If he gets tackled for losses just because five guys get in, what does that tell me? If he breaks a 30-yard run, but that's because their defense was a sieve, what does that tell me? So I want to see him in a situation. So I think you'll see Gray play a decent amount early. The question is he the first backup? And if he is, I think it's actually to see what he does more than he's the guy who's number two. It's to see if he can be one of the guys they're going to keep.
Yeah, and they could alternate them too. We just don't know. But
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And like you said, in another video, this is going to be a passing team.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and they both can catch. Even though Gray can't catch punts and kickoffs, he can catch. He's good. He's good out of the backfield. So all
Right.
the running backs they have on the roster, with the possible exception of Dante Miller, can catch. I don't know about Miller yet. We've seen so reports on his hands. We'll have to see that. But they can catch. I mean, Tracy's a former wide receiver, and Singletary's really good at catching the
Yeah.
football.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All right. So with that in mind, we know the game's coming up. We want to keep this pretty tight.
Yeah.
Uh, let's do. We'll have you. I'll have you go first. Maybe we'll go one. We'll go 1-1. We'll go back and forth. We'll do
No.
three, and
Okay.
then that way we don't. We don't necessarily mimic each other. I'll let you go first. First guy, the number one guy tonight that you want to see. It doesn't matter
Well, how
where
how
they
many
are.
are we doing? Three?
We'll just do three each. We'll start with one. I'll
Okay.
do one, and then we'll go back and forth.
This is not in any particular order, but I've mentioned these. So again, there's a bunch of players, but really Josh Azudu to me is going to be one of the must guys to watch tonight because so much of the depth situation is going to depend on him. If he can't hack it tonight, then depth wise, again, I'm not saying it's a red flag for the starters, but depth wise, that's a red flag, and they may be looking. So Josh Azudu to me is number one.
All right. So I'm going to go with the guy that I at first wasn't sure, but you've kind of helped me believe that he will. I want to see Theo Johnson. I think it's very important. Bellinger is Bellinger. He's not what he was as a rookie, and he's not what he was last year. Somewhere kind of in the middle, I think. So we don't have a guy. Johnson could be that guy, and if he's playing, I want to see how he moves. I want to see him. I want to see him blocking as well. So I'd like to see him play a little bit. So he's my first guy off, even though I don't think he's the most integral portion of the team. Of like he's got to be that guy. He's the guy I want to see first. So that's my first one.
Okay. Second is Deontay Johnson. So I think he's pushing, this is his opinion, I think he's pushing Micah McFadden for a starting position. And as I said in another video, Bobby Okereke seems to think very highly of him. He's been getting first team reps. Okereke has also mentioned that physically Johnson reminds him of himself, which is a really good thing. So he's the other ones. He's number two.
All right. So number two for me, then I'm going to go. I do want to see Tracy. I want to see Tracy, and I want to see what he can become. We need a back beyond Singletary. We need somebody. Singletary, I think, he's a good at a number of things. He's not great at anything. I think Tracy brings a little bit more juice, even though he's an older back coming out of college. He has almost no wear and tear from the running back position on him. So he's a guy that I definitely think is the guy I want to see tonight. So he's my number two.
I want to say one of the cornerbacks, but there's so many of them, and so I'm going to go in a different direction. But my honorable mention is going to be Trey Hawkins,
Mm.
but I'm going to say Ryder Anderson because he's got to prove to me that he's more than a practice squad player. So I'm really going to be watching him tonight because if he is more than that, then the Giants are in a good situation. I got to see it. To believe it, the hype, not hype. It's not, people have been saying, well, he's wowing everybody. But when Bowen comes out and says, I like our DL situation, we're going to be cutting some good players. Ryder Anderson's in that equation, and he's got to show to me that he's worthy of a 53-man roster.
Sure. All right, so I'll do an honorable mention then, and I'm going to pick two guys as the honorable, and that's going to be I want to see Manhertz and Stoll. I just need to see which one of them could be the other guy, because we're going to have.
I'm going to stop you there. I don't think Stoll's playing because I think he's in concussion protocol.
Oh, that's right, he's in concussion. But then I do need to see Manhertz. What does he do or not do? Because I still think if he can't catch and he can only block, he can't be the third tight end. He might be able to be the fourth tight end, but he can't be the third tight end. So we know we have two.
I'm not even sure he plays though because he's been in the league so long, and they know what they got in him. I just don't know if I'd be surprised if he. Well, he might have to play.
You almost have to because if Bellinger doesn't play. Because if Bellinger doesn't play, and then like you just said, Stoll doesn't play. Now we're down to two.
There's two tight ends that are going to be out tonight.
And Cager's out. Yeah, and Cager's out.
And if they don't play Bellinger, he may have to play too. So yeah.
That'll be interesting. So then the guy I want to see, and you already mentioned him though, is I want to see Drew Lock. I want to see I want to see what Lock does. I want to see his command of the overall offense, and that's more important to me than the overall results. Like, does he pick the right guy? How does his throws look? He's going to deal with some pressure. This is not the number one offensive line, but we're not going against the number one defensive line either. But we're potentially second, third O line for us because of the injuries already up front, and we've moved some other people around. So I want to see what he does, though. I think it's very important. As much as it's important for DeVito, I think in reality, this is Locke's deal. It's Locke's deal to lose the backup job, not to win it. So if he plays poorly, then that opens the door for DeVito potentially, or somebody else that we go and get if we decide we just can't do it. But I think I want to see Locke, and I want to see how he commands the offense.
Yeah, and his best friend tonight might be Allen Robinson if he plays, because he's the vet, and if I'm Locke and I'm trying to make a statement, I'm going to the veteran tonight who knows how to get open. So,
And it should also be, I would think McKenzie and Boykin should also be playing quite a bit because those guys are all competing with
yeah,
each other to make the team.
yeah.
So yeah.
Okay,
Well,
great.
so yeah, overall, let's temper expectations. It doesn't matter who
It's
wins
the
this
first
game.
game. It's the first
Doesn't
preseason game.
go
Yeah.
back and look at 86. The Giants did not play well in the preseason early on. I think they lost. I think it was either Detroit or Atlanta. They did not play well at all. Don't worry about it. It's really, let's make sure nobody gets hurt. That's the biggest thing. Nobody get hurt. And then we'll just go from there. But there we go. That's our Giants Lions preview, first game preview of 2024 on Inside BBI with John and Eric.
And we will have a review in a couple of days.
There we go. So again, folks, if you can like, subscribe, really appreciate it. And thanks for checking Inside BBI, and stay tuned for more videos.